Yeah. Subscribe to the channel. Colonel Sergei Ivanovich Zubov, the head of the colony of the strict regime, was in a state of strongest mental excitement. Not knowing what to do to calm the nerves that were cracking along the seams, he was doing incompatible things. He drank grams of vodka and at the same time a powerful sedative. But it was not here. The head began to split from the unbearable hellish pain. It seemed that the mind was confused, and this confusion has completely destroyed his conscience, humanity, and awareness of what he is doing. It was in this state that Zubov mercilessly sent his year-old stepdaughter Sophia, who inherited him from his late wife Nadezhda, to the convict cell a few minutes ago. His wife died a year ago, suddenly from a heart attack. The neighbors around the house were whispering in the corners that it was Zubov, with his impudent behavior, who drove his wife to the grave ahead of time. The girl was suffering from her mother's death, crying her eyes out. On Saturdays, Sophia went to her mother's grave, and on Sundays to church. She constantly prayed for her soul that had left for another world. Sophia's father almost did not remember. Her mother said that he disappeared without a trace during the hunt in the forest. But he never returned. Zubov's father was a cruel, strict, and even cruel person, so the relationship with the stepmother did not work out. At first, an infidelity arose, gradually turning into hatred. The father repeated all the time, "I have my own son, and I don't need a child of someone else." For years of Zubov's life with his mother, the girl could not love her father and perceived him as a stranger who was forced to endure. She didn't understand why her mother married such a heartless man. Her mother said that she took such a detour because of moneylessness. But how can you live without love? Sophia's child brain refused to accept it. He considered the girl as a burden, which he, as a slave, should carry on himself for at least 2 more years. So they lived like two people without a partner. Only Zubov's son Denis diluted this invisible confrontation. It seemed surprising, but Sophie and him had a good relationship. Denis valued Sophie's friendship. He understood that it was not easy for her to live in this world. He constantly defended the girl from unfair, angry attacks from his father. But Denis went to study in another city, and Sophie was left alone with her father, who didn't want to understand her. Sophia dreamed of only one thing. After school, she would go to work, have her own means of living, and leave her father. Usually, a chatty father returned home late today, in a state of unrestrained excitement. Then he argued with someone on the phone for a long time, and after a while Sophia muttered only 2 words. "Get ready immediately." Sophia desperately resisted when she realized what was happening. She was led to the cell by a long corridor to the criminal. The girl's heart immediately went into her heels, and a terrible premonition arose, that she would not leave this place alive. "No, Sergei Ivanovich, don't. What have I done to you so terrible? Don't ruin me," she prayed, looking at the crazy face of the father, and clung to his hand. He replied in a completely non-participatory icy tone, "Go work for the family, you'll do something for it. You are nobody to me, and I don't owe you anything until the end of my life." Indifferently, Zubov closed the door of the cell, and then went into his office, fell down in his chair, and remembered all the events that preceded this terrible act. Barely in the morning of this bad day, the colonel arrived at work and immediately got a call that sounded like thunder in the clear sky. Zubov's face was distorted in a displeased grin. He was ready to hear anything, but not this. "Well, boss, you didn't expect a call?" Someone's rude and mocking voice spoke at the other end of the wire. "Come on, get out of here, your son owes us a lot of money. Today, the debt is already 1,000,000 rubles. He lost the cards, but he doesn't want to return them. He says you will pay. In general, you have a week, and so that you don't get into trouble here, you'll be in control of the thief. The authority thief, he sits in your colony on the bed. Don't think of lying to us. Don't pay the debt. You'll pay with your head, and not only yours." "Who are you?" "Who?" I shouted that I had the strength and teeth. "It doesn't matter who, prepare the money." "But I don't have that kind of money now," said Zubov. "And these are your problems. Apartment, sell the car. What else do you have there?" After such statements, the colonel was not just in confusion, but in a wild shock. It seemed to him that he had lost the ability to think rationally. Denis, his son from the first marriage, is a smart, responsible boy. A round expert, graduated from a school with a gold medal. And now he is studying in a prestigious capital university. He never had any bad habits, especially when it came to card games. And Dennis is an honest guy. If something happened to him, he would definitely inform. He was consoling himself, but still he couldn't contain the tremor in his body. He shook his hands and dialed his son's phone number. And suddenly I don't know what it is. Maybe Deniska contacted a bad company and went away. The colonel was worried. "Yes, Dad." Dennis replied cheerfully to his father's call. "Dennis, are you okay? Is there enough money for everything?" "Yes, Dad, I'm fine. I'm studying." "Well, of course, I have enough money. You always supply me with them. And if there is a problem, I can always turn to you. What are the questions? Something happened?" Colonel was upset, not knowing what to say. He did not want to believe in the bad, and he rejected such thoughts from himself. "No, son, nothing happened." He brushed his teeth. "Just wanted to hear you." "Ah, I see," said Dennis. "I'm not comfortable speaking right now. I'm at a lecture at the Institute. I'll call you back." A young man was usually sad about his emotions in communication with his father, and the colonel valued his son and tried to do everything for him. Zubov, although a person who is not suffering from excessive kindness, who barely has enough for his own child, but he definitely doesn't. He was barely noticing the anxiety. Zubov was completely overwhelmed by the state of anxiety and misunderstanding. His intuition did not deceive him. He called his son's number many times, but he kept silent. But after a while, he received a call from strangers again. The same mocking voice as a cat walked through the colonel's nerves. "Well, Daddy, are you feeling better? When will you start paying the money? I need to talk to my son again," said Zubov. "You'll talk when you make your first payments," followed the instant answer. "But how? It's impossible," said Zubov. "What's impossible here? Take money off your accounts and transfer it. You don't have time to swing." The man demanded in his own tone, and then added with a laugh, "Maybe you want to pay with nature? The thief will accept." The impudent laughed. But the man clearly joked about the evil, and the colonel took it all for a clean coin. "Why does my son have problems, and she continues to live as if nothing had happened?" Zubov thought about the cockroach. In his head, a crazy thought arose, which in the first seconds even became scary to him. He thought about throwing the cockroach into the raven's chamber, and he did it in a naive way, without thinking about the consequences. At that moment, all Zubov's thoughts were occupied with his own son, and there was no place for a stranger child in them. "It's done." The colonel considered himself a full-fledged master in the colony and did everything that his sweetheart wished. Sophia was only, and she experienced such a freezing horror that even an adult person can't handle. The door to hell closed behind her back. She looked inside the cell and shuddered. Sophia suddenly showed that she was losing consciousness. It was worth standing on her feet, and then the girl with a hazy look looked around. The picture was not joyful at all. A row of upper and lower beds spread in front, which seemed to last forever. Tens of male eyes looked at her, some with a smile, some with curiosity, and the majority with unprotected, pretentious greed. "Wow, what do we get such a sweet gift for?" heard a hoarse male voice from the depths of the chamber. Sophia did not have time to orient herself and understand where the voice comes from, as the unshaved, lazy man immediately jumped off the bed and appeared in front of her like hell. He devoured Sophia with his eyes from top to bottom and even whistled with pleasure, which awaited him ahead. And what was there to look at? The built-up figure of Sophia and a beautiful face in the frame of a hoof of curly hair clung to the glances. "Can I be the first? I have a birthday today. It's hard to breathe," said the man, and pulled the girl to himself with all his might. Sophia felt like a bird that had fallen into a cage, but could not even utter a word. The tongue did not budge, and the legs became cotton. The tall, powerful man, like a rock, rose above Sophia and like a wild beast, ready to rush to the prey he had just caught. And he rushed to himself, but suddenly, behind Sophia's back, the voices of other, the same, guards or convicts were heard. "Why are you the first? Are you the main here? We want to." From all sides, hoaxes and gossips were heard. The most repulsive convicts jumped off their beds and ran forward, completely unaware of what was happening. As soon as this whirlwind curled around Sophia, it darkened in her eyes. It seemed to her that hundreds of hands were dragging her straight into hell. She was already mentally prepared for death, because she realized that if what the Zeki had planned would happen, she would no longer have to live. And at that moment, a voice was heard from which everyone trembled. "Come on, stop this nonsense. Are you people or beasts? Most of you have wives and children at your disposal. How can you be so ashamed to behave like this? She's a child after all. Let her go immediately." The voice was not loud, but persistent, and belonged to a skinny, short-tempered man. He waved his hand. Surprisingly, but as if by the moment of the magic wand, the screams and the horse stopped at that very second. "Ugh! And you? You attacked the defenseless one. I will punish you for such things so that you will not show yourself." "Well, Voron, I'm sorry, what are we? We are nothing, but there was no woman for a long time, you understand. And here is such a young, beautiful FIFA came in. They could not hold back." The man named Voron got off his bed and, with his bare feet, like an old man, approached the girl. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia." Quietly, as the poisoned beast, the girl spoke. She did not hope for salvation, and looked scared at the strange man who saved her from the inevitable trouble. "My name is Ivan Andreevich Voronov. Let's be friends. Don't be afraid. No one will do anything bad to you here. Do not think that the convicts are on the surface of evil and cruel people. Each of them has a difficult fate behind their back, but this does not mean that they have lost good human qualities. Often free people are worse than the convicts. Take this Zubov, you nasty person. He put you in jail." Sophia seemed to be in a heat of such words. Where does this man, actually an old man for her, know about their relationship with Zubov? In response, she nodded her head and asked briefly, "Where do you know about me?" "I know a lot. I've lived a lot, seen even more." And suddenly Sophia, she felt "So Mom said," Sophia replied, and tears rolled down her cheek. She herself did not expect to be disheartened and cry like a child. "I'm alone. I'm all alone. My father is long gone, and my mother is gone a year ago. My father hates me. How to live on?" Then Voronov turned sharply, and looking straight into Sophia's eyes, he quietly said, "Your father is alive. Boris is alive." She was astonished and looked at an elderly man with indifference, and could not believe the truthfulness of the words she said. "How is this possible? Mom said that Dad disappeared on a hunt in the forest. Where is he then?" Voronov took Sophie's hand and firmly held her in his hand. "I don't know what kind of people you hope for, but I was sitting with him in the colony in the previous walk. We had a lot of time to tell each other about our sinful life. Boris told that he, his wife Nadezhda, and Sergei Zubov are classmates. And then Boris and Sergei became co-workers. Both worked in the police. Zubov was always terribly jealous of successful Boris. Best student in school, best at work. And in personal life, Boris was also lucky. First beauties always paid attention to him. Such a beauty was your mother Nadezhda. Zubov also looked at her. But hope was given to your father. Boris actively moved along the service ladder. Sergei was on a lower position. After receiving another title from Boris, Zubov was very jealous and decided to set up a co-servant. He set up so that Boris was imprisoned for a real term for the service irresponsibility and bribery. But Zubov did not like this. "Hope, your mother said that her husband Boris died in prison from pneumonia. He made up the death documents and took hope in himself. Here are the women of the bitch. Her husband did not cool her down, and she went for another." Sophia, hiding her breath, listened to the elderly and swallowed burning tears. "Do not talk about your mother like that. She was good." "Okay, sorry, it's your truth. You need to deal with your own first." Voronov said many things. Sophia took the story of the man as a revelation to the depths of the soul that struck her consciousness. She asked with a cold heart, "Where is my father now? Don't you know?" "I don't know, girl. I only know one thing. You don't have to be afraid of this Colonel Zubov anymore. There is another force for any force. Remember my word. Since he is done with you, not every gypsy will do. He has long been like a bone in everyone's throat and will be punished for his crimes." Only Voronov managed to pronounce these words as a loud clang of keys was heard and the door opened in the chamber with a thud. Zubov ran into the chamber. He looked around the chamber again and again with a shuddering gaze, probably looking for a torn body of a stepmother. Where? Finally, he saw Sophia, alive and unharmed, next to Voronov, and sighed with relief. The colonel grabbed the girl by the hand and dragged her out of the cell. Let's go from here, are you okay? He repeatedly repeated, after feeling drunk in the morning in the office and throwing away the remains of the fool. Zubov with horror realized what he had done to the woman and what it was threatening him. I can be jailed because of this pig face. One and only thought was knocking in his head. He grabbed Sophia's hand and looked at her with his eyes. You just don't tell anyone that it was good in the cell. We are relatives, you promise? Everyone in this life can make a mistake. The girl kept silent. After she learned about her father, she hated her father even more. And the colonel, without stopping, treated Sophia. Why are you silent? Are you going to talk to me? He squeezed Sophia's hand with such force that it seemed to crack bones. Even in such a situation, when his fate was hanging on the hair, the father could not do without threats and insults. But after what happened to her, Sophia was not afraid of anything. Tell me where my father is now, she suddenly asked. The colonel got pale and his lower lip shook. But your father died, and the girl interrupted the father on the floor. Don't lie to me, I know everything. Oh my God, what does she know? Zubov was amazed. What could this old sclerotic Voronov say to her? A few seconds later, Zubov said, What if I tell you where he could be? You won't testify against me, will you? Sophia silently nodded her head. But the hard-earned consent of the girl did not save Zubov. God did not help him. This man has done too many evils. A series of criminal crimes followed him like a train, not to mention the relations with the prisoners. A day later, people entered the colonel's office in uniform and announced his arrest. Zubov shook like a leaf of a pomegranate. He was blushing that he was not guilty. His subordinates were supporting him everywhere, and now he is threatened with the life of his son Dennis and demanded money. When Zubov learned that the phone calls about his son were no more than clowns, only one of the tricks to get him out of the water came to me in rage. You will all pay for this. You had no right to deceive me and mock me, screamed the arrested, spitting saliva. Stop talking nonsense. You also had no right to mock the scoundrel. The zone is waiting for you. I advise you to behave yourself, said one of the policemen, putting on the arrested handcuffs. After a few months, Colonel Zubov was sentenced, and for the crime, he received a deserved punishment. Despite the efforts of the dear lawyer hired to him, the term was reduced only by a year, and Zubov was locked up in places not so remote for as long as years. Sophia was left alone in her father's empty apartment. After what happened, she could not and did not want to stay there. She decided to go to whatever it was to find her father. And no matter what happened between him, his mother, and Zubov, the main thing is that he exists in this world, and therefore she will not be alone. The address given to Zubov turned out to be accurate. The door to a small apartment in an old panel house opened to the hair of a thin man with an empty look, closely looking at her eyes. Are you Boris? The man was shocked by the body, trying to find out the features of his family, who were once present in his life. I'm Sophia, daughter of Nadezhda, said the girl, and got pale, not knowing how to continue in such a situation. Suddenly, a man's cheek rolled a barely noticeable tear, and then he took the girl's hand in his and said, Yes, I'm Boris. I know you hate that I didn't look for you. This is true, and you have the right to hate me, my daughter. Having been silent for a while, swallowing the lump of tears, Boris said, I had everything. My favorite family, great job, happiness in life. But everything in one piece fell apart. I did not feel the moving troubles. I did not notice how my friend turned into an enemy. I got into prison for a long time, losing everything and myself too. I didn't forgive my wife Nadezhda, who simply believed Zubov about my death and didn't even try to find me. I'm sorry, Sophia, in front of you. I'm very sorry. The wife's departure broke me so much that the resentment was completely overpowering me, and I decided to just give up on the past. I was young. I didn't act like a man, and now I live alone like a ring that no one needs. Forgive me, daughter, if you can. Sophia was silent, listened to her father, and understood that she would not be lonely anymore. All her naturalness was screaming about it. I have long forgiven you, father. Allow me only to see and hear you. Boris Huguet Sophiatikli. Everything will be fine. We are together, and therefore we will live.